All right. I hope everybody enjoyed that little
that was great
conversation.
Wait, is something missing from that tape? What the hell happened?
No, we're done now.
Well, thanks for stopping by, folks. Those LBJ tapes. Wow. The welcome to Rex Bradford, the head of the Mary Ferrell Foundation. I've been meaning to have him on as a guest for a number of years. Haven't had time, but now we have found the time to do it. And Rex is administrating a lot more than he did back in the old days when he was actually doing some deep dives and attending Lancer, like Eric and I are going to be doing this Friday. You would go back to Lancer in the late 90s, right, Rex?
Yeah, I think I first attended it in 98.
Wow.
And then gave my first talk in 99 and did that for quite a while. Fallen out of the habit the last few years, but
well, maybe you'll be watching us with virtually this year, because we're going to be doing a presentation, I think Saturday night after the banquet and the whatever else they've got down there, the lottery and the banquet and the awards, and then you eventually get to a show.
Well, I saw in your description that you were driving a Penske truck with JFK files. So, I mean, can you just break that down?
Whoa, let's just back up for a second and tell everyone who Mary Ferrell was before we get into the personal oddities of Rex Bradford. Tell the audience who and what Mary Ferrell was as an OG.
Mary Ferrell was a woman who lived in Dallas. She was a legal secretary. And from the very day Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, she became fascinated. She had her sons run out that day and buy all the editions of the newspapers. And over time, and not very much time, she became kind of the hub in Dallas, where all the researchers and journalists and writers would come, stay at her house often. She collected tons of books and government documents. I just finally did an inventory of her 2,500 books that we have.
Wow.
On all kinds of topics beyond the assassinations. And so if you look at a lot of the books written in the 70s and 80s, so many of them are dedicated to her because she was an important person for gluing people together. She never wrote a book, but she did create a database of 10,000 index cards and then put it on MS-DOS herself. And wrote a series of chronologies as well. But mostly she was more of a connector than author or that sort of thing. She had a special role in this. And so when this foundation came to be in the early 2000s, it was a sort of an obvious choice to basically use Mary's name, get her blessing on it, get her materials as well, and try to carry on that kind of mission of providing information to a wide audience and using the internet in this case to do it.
What was your original connection to her, Rex? How did you get to know her?
I met her at a couple of conferences. When I fell down this rabbit hole and as a software developer decided my contribution would obviously be scanning documents and putting the collections together. Originally did that on CD-ROM, and are putting together an 8 CD-ROM set of the Russ Holmes work file of some 40,000 CIA, 7,000 documents, many pages. And I brought it was to Dallas for one of the conferences, was selling it for actual money at that point. And Mary came along with her wheelchair, and I met her for the first time and showed it to her, and she put it in her bag. And
she stole it from you, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So I only met her a few times, but then when it came time to put a foundation together, and a bunch of different people were presenting ideas around it, I presented the idea that really doing more research, in her name wasn't as important as trying to share what's already known and to also get the government documents that had been pouring out in the 90s online and accessible to everybody. And she chose that as the direction for the foundation. She's only lived another couple of years after it was formed.
Right.
Involved in sort of helping launch the thing.
Does she have any kids or family or?
She did. I'm not really in very good touch, but I've been in touch a little bit with a couple of family members. They support.
Right. And this is a 501c, Rex. It's a
501c3 nonprofit foundation.
Just so people know at home, this is
I decided early on that, putting these documents behind a paywall wasn't going to fly, but we did want to be able to have kind of an ongoing operation. So the compromise I ended up coming up with was that every page of every document and every resource is free to all to browse, share links, whatever. But if you want to do serious research and keep running search after search after search after search, eventually it cuts you off and says, we want you to become a paid member. To be honest, you could just shut down your browser and come back later and you're good to go again. But it's a nudge for people that are using the site actively to become a member.
Yeah, I recommend it to everyone at home. I re-up every year if I can remember, and I think that people who want to investigate this situation on their own should join the Mary Ferrell Foundation and pay the small fee, the annual fee, which goes to running it. So just everybody out there, I've been doing it for a long time. I think you guys who are interested in this may want to join up as well. Now, how did you become El Presidente of the Mary Ferrell Foundation? Are there vice presidential people below the Bradford?
Yes, yeah, we have a small board of directors, Jeff Morley, Bill Snippich, and Larry Hancock at this point, and it's been that way for a while. Deborah Conway was one for a time as well. But it's a pretty shoestring operation. We punch above our weight, I think. Some people think we're the National Archives or whatever, and it's really just a website with hard scrabbling at a computer. I do most of the work actually involved in getting all the document collections up and whatever, although do get help on certain projects, things like the Cryptonym project, where we have a magic decoder ring for all those crazy code words and CIA files. That thing has an active group of people led by Bill Simpich that's been going crazy, putting together well over 1,000 of those now with details on what they mean and links to them and so forth. But I'm primarily the guy sort of minding the store and doing the document collections, which is the big feature on the site.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a great looking site, and it's easy to navigate for an idiot like myself, which is very helpful. And others there. I mean, it's not, the National Archives could be kind of overwhelming, but I wanted to ask you about the recent MLK documents that that have come to light. What is the status of those now? So
as you listeners may know, 2025 has been sort of a banner year for declassification. I got to hand it to the administration, promises kept on one front at least, where JFK files, RFK assassination files, and MLK assassination files have been tumbling out of the archives. I've been busy this year. And the most recent one was about 250,000 pages on the Martin Luther King assassination. It's basically, most of it is the FBI full headquarters file and 50 field office files. And then there's some other sub-collections as well. And so that was a big slog to put online because, to be honest, they kind of shoveled it out there with semi-random file names and stuff. So I worked with a guy named Stu Wexler, who's both an FBI files expert and also an expert on Martin Luther King assassinations, written a couple books. And he and I together sort of figured out, how to name each of the files. That this is actually volume 11 of the headquarters files with serial numbers 1122 to 1349. Whereas it's named, XXXXX22.
Yeah, FBI files can be quite repetitive numerically, right, Rex? Yeah. I mean, from remembering going into FBI files, they are not very good at delineating which is which. From the RFK assassination files that I once got a hold of.
Yep. So we basically organized them into groups and subgroups and named them. And so, they're searchable, But one of the dirty secrets of the Mary Ferrell Foundation and anybody working with these documents is that the computer's ability to recognize the text is not fantastic. It makes a lot of mistakes, and so try 3 different searches, and also learn how to browse and find things by various means.
Are you do you have a database with stored meta information on every document, or
Yeah,
how are you going about that?
Yeah, I mean the website pages are driven from internal databases, and also one of the tools I'm proud of that's also very useful for people doing JFK files research is the thing I created called the JFK Database Explorer. People may know of RIF numbers. A lot of JFK documents, everything that came out after the review board has a 13-digit code number to identify it with a whole bunch of metadata from, to, date, subjects, title, et cetera, et cetera. And so that stuff is all online at NARA in 6 spreadsheets. And I basically downloaded the 6 spreadsheets and then made a search and filter tool front end for it. So you can slice and dice the records by all kinds of different means. Which ones are in transparency plans? Which ones come from which agencies? Filter by date range, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an important tool for people that are actively trying to work in the JFK files.
Are you working with any local LLMs or anything of that sort to maybe go to the next level?
It's funny you mentioned it. I'm just this week finally signing up for a ChatGPT account. I worked with a few graduate students earlier this year, and they did a prototype project. And what we settled on, because there wasn't much time and it worked the best of everything we tried, was simply essay summarization. We have an essay archive, which is both on-site essays, but also just a searchable link to essays on other websites, sort of a place to see what's what, and then link off to go read it on their website. And the launch page for a given essay is kind of spare, and so we've just started sprucing it up with summaries written by AI, because there's too many essays for us to humbly sit down and try to write summaries of them. And that's one thing it does a pretty good job at. I've been an AI skeptic for a lot of uses, ChatGPT, who killed Kennedy? I don't know. I've had funny emails from people to that effect, but something like summarizing essays it's good at. And so I'm starting to explore some uses of AI.
Are you looking into, reason why I mentioned local LLMs is the sandboxing principle.
Yes.
Because ChatGPT has something known as hallucinations. Pretty much all of them do if they're connected to the internet. And they will come up with some interesting things, like just facts that aren't facts, or whatever. But if you do have the information sandboxes in, only crawl through these documents, but nothing else.
It's a so-called RAG system. And for instance, Google's Gemini, they have a, I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Notebook LM.
Yeah, Notebook LM. That I've seen an amazing demonstration of that, where a JFK book, in fact, was put into it, and you could query the book, and it was quite good. And so I'm starting to turn my attention towards that particular thing. The rules of the game for these AI tools changes constantly, and that one doesn't look like you can sort of wire it up to a website for end users to use, or maybe you can. They keep changing the terms and conditions for how these things work, but I think that's probably in our future, that kind of tool.
Wow. You want to get back to what Eric was asking about, how you got into this thing with a Penske truck or something?
Sure. If I may dial way back, I'm a latecomer compared to a lot of people I met. I couldn't have told you 2 words about the whole affair of Kennedy's killing.
But where did you go to college? Were you in the Northeast going to school?
I went to UMass Amherst.
Oh, wow. Just like Dr. J.
Yeah. And, but I was not a history major. I was a psychology major, but then got into computers, but they didn't have a computer science degree. I was back in the old days.
Wow.
And so I became self-taught, and I ended up getting into computer games and having a computer game career for a few decades.
Wow.
But in 1998, the JFK movie came on TV. and I was upstairs reading a C++ programming book. I remember it well, and kind of looking up at the TV and looking back at my book and looking over the TV, and said, that's pretty interesting. And I'm an avid reader, so next time I was in a bookstore, I went over to the history section and I found a book, and I read it, and I said, wow, if 1/3 of what the book is true, this is unbelievable. And I was about dead on, about 1/3 of the book was true.
Perfect.
And I read another, and like so many people.
Wait, what was the original book you were reading?
I probably shouldn't speak ill of anyone.
Okay. Okay.
So I fell hard like a lot of people and read book after book after book.
It was case closed, Mark.
It was case closed.
No, but my wife would tell you I think that was about my 4th book, and I kept, after the first 6 or 7 books, I kept saying, no, it turns out this is the story. And then finally, after about 8 books, I'm like, okay, just chill,
Yeah.
Anyhow, I found out about the conferences. Copa and Lancer were both having conferences in 1998. So I signed up for both of them because I didn't know anybody, had no idea. And I went, and everybody there is passing around mimeographs, photocopies of these declassified documents, because this is 1998. This is the tail end of the review board with these millions of pages of stuff being classified. And there were mind-blowing stories in there. I mean, we'll get into a little bit of it, but from the medical evidence to Mexico City to whatever, it was like unbelievable stuff. Even Kennedy foreign policy stuff like Vietnam withdrawal plans.
Yeah.
And so everyone's passing around these things, and I'm looking at people saying, have you guys ever heard of scanners or the internet or anything? And to be fair, the internet was pretty new at that point. But they hadn't. And so that's when I decided pretty much right then that I was going to be the self-appointed electronic archivist of all this, because I was
wow.
And so within about a year, in 1999, I created an organization called History Matters.
I remember History Matters. Yeah.
And I paid over $1,000 for a copy of the 26 volumes and took them to a place and had them chop the bindings off so I could scan them all.
Wow.
And the paper's so thin on those, I scanned every page one by one.
Wow.
26 volumes.
Wow.
3 a.m.
Did your fingers fall off eventually, Rick? I mean,
yeah.
That sounds like you have arthritis now. I mean,
so I'm belaboring. So to get to the story, the Penske truck story, I was in Dallas the next year in '99. I gave a talk called Tour to Digital Archive, in which I think everyone thought I had 6 heads, because I was talking about everything that then came to pass and became my life, which is how we need to scan these things, write essays with links to them so people don't have to take your word for it in the book. They can find out for themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And I met a homeless guy in an elevator at the Lancer conference named Lenny Mather, brilliant guy, lost child of the 60s. And he introduced me to a guy named Jim Lazar, who was an unsung hero in this whole business. Jim Lazar ran the Assassination Archives and Research Center, the AARC, which for decades sued the government under the Freedom of Information Act on behalf of clients for all kinds of things, including JFK Records. Jim and I got all excited about this stuff. I ended up writing a proposal for how, if we had $600,000, we could scan the AARC's holdings. And we all had a good laugh over that, because nobody had, $6 to rub together for a project like this. So then what I started to do is scan some smaller document collections and put them on CD. And I worked with the AARC with some of their stuff.
Did you ever get any grants or apply for any grants?
Nah, just a self-starter. I don't know. No, I got discovered when we did the Mary Ferrell Foundation. And so what happened by then is when this whole thing got kicked up a notch, that's when I started driving Penske trucks full of declassified government documents from DC, where the AARC is located, up to Massachusetts for scanning. At one point, we were living in a condo when we were building a new house, and I had maybe 150 of these boxes in my garage. And there was a guy who was an old Navy guy who was kind of like mayor of the condo area, a self-appointed mayor. And he came around And I would stand in front of the garage door with all these boxes marked JFK, CI, FBI. He would stare at them and talk to me. And he was too polite to ask what they were, and I just let him on and so he didn't say a word about them. But so probably ended up. My daughters were in a couple of the truck rides. We took about four or five Penske truck trips back and forth. And at this point, now the Mary Ferrell Foundation has pushing 3 million pages of
Wow.
records on these affairs.
Question now, the records that you brought up there, were they copies of what's still in DC? Or if not, what about the physical copies? Are they safe somewhere?
Well, the ARC ones, they're basically in mini storage, so safe as mini storage is. But and I've obviously tons of backup copies electronically of the scanned record, whatever. The big thing that was a huge Kickstarter for this was a guy named Mark Allen with Jim Lazar as his lawyer had in 1981 filed a FOIA lawsuit for all the FBI and CIA records that the House committee had seen and then locked away, without publishing them. And that lawsuit went on for 17 years. And finally, when both agencies were delivering those very same documents to the National Archives anyway, they settled the lawsuit and gave a second copy, the only second copy of them, to Mark Allen and thus the ARC. And that was huge because going and scanning these things at the National Archives is not for the faint of heart. I've done it many times myself. It's very tedious and slow. You can't take the staples out of the paper.
Right.
You can't run them through a sheet-fed scanner. So being able to get this collection of a couple hundred boxes of paper just in this one collection and bring them up and just fly them through a scanner and put them online was transformative. And that's really what kickstarted this big collection of documents. It wouldn't be nearly the size it was without the ARC. Jim Lazar played another amazing role in all this, which is that when the Oliver Stone movie was responsible for the JFK Records Act, the trailer of the movie talked about all the documents locked away, till your grandmother or to your grandchildren are dead. And it caused a huge furor and letter writing and phone calling to Congress. And so John Glenn's subcommittee was the one that put together this act, but there was a lot of foot dragging and unhappiness. And at one point, Jim Lazar, the Congress people kept asking, why do we need this? We have the FOIA anyway. Why do we need this special law? And Jim Lazar showed one day to one of John Glenn's staffers a stack of FBI FOIA releases with just blackouts like crazy. Every page was 2/3 blacked out. And the staffer's eyes went wide and he said, may I show these to the senator? And he went off. And then the floodgates burst and they passed the law. And it was transformative for our understanding of some of the aspects of this case. Anyway.
Where are we now with the current lawsuit with, against by the Mary Ferrell Foundation?
Yeah. We filed a lawsuit a few years ago on a few different fronts. One aspect of it was to complete the JFK Records releases, because what had happened in 2017 was when the JFK Records Act specified that absent a presidential order, everything that had been either withheld in full or partially released would finally all come out. And then Pompeo went to Donald Trump and they did a deal and released they released a bunch and kept a bunch back. And then there was this whole series of rolling, sort of slow walking stuff. And then finally, under Joe Biden, they created these Orwellianly named transparency plans, which define criteria by which the rest of the stuff would just never come out. And the logjam broke this year, right? And so that part of the lawsuit it's not entirely moot, but the political system prevailed, I guess, or however you want to describe it. But we have at this point the documents that went into the JFK collection based on the review board's work The ones that are releasable, there are some that were never going to be released because they're grand jury records, or they're under
Right.
gifts, or they have most of them are IRS information, in fact, tax forms and stuff. But the other ones are almost all released. This is such a big collection that stuff falls through the cracks. And many people have found, hey, what happened to this one? And why is this thing redacted? But for the most part, it's been done.
Did it surprise you when the executive order came out to release everything?
Well, it was in the wind, so I was holding my breath. I said, I think maybe it's going to happen this time. We'll see. And
Rex, what's the deal with tax records? Why are these the holy grail of documents of dead people? You want to explain that? I still can't get my mind around why we can't see the tax records of the Payne family and Oswald and the people who are dead. I understand possibly people that are alive, but why is this so private, so crazily guarded?
It's a very good question. Some of them, because like Oswald's tax returns Marina ended up, I think, releasing them years ago.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. I mean, I have sympathy for some of the stuff, like the living House Committee staffers whose Social Security numbers got released. I think that Social Security number doesn't, unless it's maybe Oswald's and you want to have some theory about that, whatever. For the most part, it's non-information, and it's only used to harm people, with identity theft. So for living people, I can see that. Tax forms of dead people, I don't know.
Can I put something out that's weird about the Social Security number, though? I don't know if you remember this, but in the 80s and through a lot of the 90s, in Arizona, people use their Social Security number as their driver's license number.
Yeah.
And they were writing it on checks all the time. So it's like, at some point we determined, holy cow, it's sacred now, but it's been out there for like 20 years for everybody.
It's true that in the modern era, there's many, many tools for identity theft, and the Social Security number is just one piece of it. So, yeah.
Right. Well, let's go back in time to your presentation of at Lancer, because we got Lancer on the mind for this weekend. You went down and you built upon, from what I'm gathering, and you could straighten me out, upon the research from the year before of John Newman from 1999. When you, am I close here? I mean, maybe you can
what happened in 99, Newman gave an explosive talk. I remember it vividly. It was basically a walkthrough of what was then new information about Mexico City.
Yeah.
And the possibility of the existence of tapes of Oswald that survived the assassination, even though the story that dribbled out over time. It was all super hush-hush, but the story was, the CIA had recycled the tapes and they never actually had them. And the FBI was mistaken when they said that they listened to the tapes and found out it wasn't Oswald, using Oswald's name on a tapped telephone line. And that was the importance of it, is there somebody impersonating Oswald on a tapped phone line? Anyway, we can get into that, but it's a long, complex story.
Do you know how Newman found this out, by the way? I always wonder, how did Newman find
the release records? There was so much dumped in 97 and 98 and early 99 that it took people time to go through it. And also he's masterful at that stuff. CIA records are not always easy to understand and in context. Anyhow, he gave this great talk, and one of the things he presented in the talk was a transcript of Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover talking the morning after the assassination, in which the first words out of LBJ's mouth in this transcript is, "What about this Mexico City trip?" And that's where Hoover says, "Well, it's very confusing for the following reason. We have up here the tape and the photograph of the man who was down there using Oswald's name. Our special agents who have Oswald here have determined that it's neither his photograph nor his voice on the tape." So that was the explosive thing. But I had just been to the LBJ library before going up to Dallas and gotten some of these cassette tapes of Johnson talking, because there's other conversations about the formation of the Warren Commission that came out when they released these LBJ tapes, and they're fascinating. The story, the calls Johnson made to pull together the commission are a story unto themselves.
Right.
So anyhow, but I didn't know about this Hoover Johnson phone call. So I went back home after the Lancer And I call up the LBJ library a couple months later. I'd lost track of it, but then remembered. So I call them up and I say, I'm interested in getting another one of these conversations. Can you mail a cassette to me? And they say, okay, well, yeah, sure. Which one? And they say, it's the one between Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover on the morning of the 23rd. And the staffer on the phone all of a sudden says, well, you don't really want that tape. It's not a very good quality. You see, he was using his vice presidential taping equipment, and
Right.
he's no good. And I'm like, I got audio engineering friends. We can probably come up with something. Could you please send me the tape? And $6 later, there it shows up in the mail a few days later, and it's 14 minutes of hiss.
Wow.
And the odd thing is, it's the cassette tapes they send you are compilations of different conversations, in chronological order that day. And so the conversations right before it are just fine, and the ones right after it are just fine. So I call the staffer back up and I say, do you know this tape looks like it's been erased, And she said, and she repeats the vice presidential taping equipment and the poor quality. And I'm like, yeah, but the call before and the call after are on the same equipment, right?
For those at home, what Rex is referring to is the 10:01 a.m. Hoover call of November 22nd, 1963, which was followed, if I remember correctly, at 10:17 with a call from LBJ to George Meany, which is crystal clear.
Right,
Rex, is
right.
what Rex is referring to.
Right. So how can the quality be bad based on this equipment if the call before and the call right after on the same equipment are fine? But they didn't budge for the story. So the next year I was going back to Lancer again, and I decided to stop by in Austin, and I go swinging in person. And I'm not making this up. I go to the front desk, talk to some new guy. I'm interested in learning more information about one of these, conversations. He says, which one? And I tell him it's the Hoover Johnson, November 23rd, and he stiffens. He says, sir, I'll go find someone who can help you.
Whoa.
So senior staffer comes down, Mr. Bradford, let's go to a private room. We go off to a private room. She says, well, how can I help you? And I said, I'm just trying to find out more about this tape that seems like it's been erased. And from, sitting on the couch 18 inches away, she gives me the same phony baloney story about the vice presidential taping equipment. And
was this Regina Greenwell, by the way, Rex? Do you remember?
No, that was not. That was Claudia Anderson.
Okay.
And I don't want to badmouth her because she was
no. I just for the record.
She showed me around the place. I got to see the original equipment, whatever. But they clearly the LBJ library had a company line on this tape. That's all it was. And everybody was instructed, here's what you're going to say.
Well, what they were going to say, from what I understand, was that the early recordings were in his vice presidential office on an IBM machine, recorded to magnetic tape and then onto a wide belt, into a not a dicta belt is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah, it's a plastic.
Did you believe that, or was that?
I actually didn't get into the recording apparatus. All I knew was that it made no sense because there's multiple conversations using the same equipment.
Right.
Yeah. One of them is literally hiss, and the other ones are fine. So it's so phony baloney.
So what was their excuse?
She sat there and just said to me, that it's the vice presidential equipment. And,
right.
And I don't know, I'm too polite, I guess. I didn't say why, So I just had her show me around, and then I decided to write about it. So I wrote an essay called The 14-Minute Gap about this, and it gave the wider context of why we have unlike the Nixon 18-minute tape gap, which is what I named the story after. This one we got a transcript, and if you read the transcript, you're like, oh, I know why they erased this tape. Too bad they missed the transcript, and I can't explain that, but we found out in this case that cover-ups are very imperfect. I mean, the Kennedy assassination had massive amounts of cover-up and not very effective.
Well, I remember the 18-minute gap because they brought in a law firm or a technical firm to examine the tapes to see if they were erased or taped over, Rex, right? For the Nixon tapes.
Yeah. In this case, it turns out when all of a sudden I wrote this essay, and then I got an email from Claudia Anderson about a year later, And she said, your essay's been receiving some, interest, and we've received a number of inquiries, and we have more information for you. Would you like to have the additional information? And I'm like, okay. And what she sends me is the audio engineering report, where in fact the Cutting Corporation, which is a company that National Archives uses for this thing, they had been hired to look at about a half a dozen different anomalies of different kinds, not all like this, and come up with their analysis. And for this one, there's just a paragraph where an engineer writes, this is a conversation, I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically he says, it looks like it was erased by rubbing it against the head of the original machine. And the date of that report was a year before before I ever contacted them. They were sitting on this report that said, yes, the tape's erased.
So did you ever request the original belt to see if it could be examined, or?
No, I never really followed up. It's still a worthy endeavor.
Right. So it's out there somewhere.
They have the original belt.
They do, right? Yeah.
That's what they made the erased copy from.
Right. So you believe, or I don't know if you believe or not, but underneath there, you may be able to discern some sort of conversation.
Yeah.
Theoretically, Rex.
The thing has this periodic little tiny blip in it. And one theory of that is that like one tiny stripe of this thing was missed. It's about 7 seconds apart. And so maybe that's it. But I tell you what, one reason why I didn't get too obsessed with that is we have a transcript.
Yeah.
And I would be willing to bet money that if we could recover the tape, it would match the transcript. And the transcript tells you why it was erased, because there's talk.
Well, explain to us what's in the transcript. So we touched on it at the very beginning of the show. But...
So what happens is Hoover called, I forget who called who, to be honest. I knew all this, but I've forgotten more about the Kennedy assassination over the last 20 years than I ever knew. But in any case, they're talking, and it's 22 hours or 21 hours after Kennedy's been killed. And so Hoover starts out just reporting the state of the case. He says, we got the rifle. Our evidence against this guy Oswald is not very, very strong at this point, but blah, blah, blah. It talks a little bit about this and that. And again, the whole thing is like 2 pages of transcript, not long, but
right.
And the very first word out of Johnson's mouth is, what's this business about Mexico City? And that's when Hoover replies, it's very confusing. We have up here the photograph. This is the so-called Mystery Man photograph, if people know about that. And the tape of the man who was down there using Oswald's name. And the problem is our special agents have determined that the photograph and the tape do not match this man's voice or his appearance. This was then... So some people dismiss this whole thing by saying, oh, the CIA is right. They actually recycled them. Hoover's doing one of his usual, I don't know what I'm talking about business. Problem with that is it was much more official than that. This was written up as part of a 5-page memo that same day that went to the Secret Service and the White House, which had a bunch of information about the state of the case and repeated this. It is true that the agents who made that determination have never been named or located.
Yeah, that was weird. I mean, supposedly these tapes were flown to Dallas, where FBI agents listened to the tapes of Oswald's voice. This is for the people at home, and said that that's not Oswald, which is the source of Hoover's information. Rex, right?
That's one possibility, but I have a theory about this actually. That's not that, which is that. First of all, Eldon Rudd is a guy who was an FBI agent, later congressman, who brought the Mystery Man photograph on a Navy plane up that evening from Mexico. And the full memo describing that trip was finally declassified, I forget when, but, at the N. Taylor U-board or later even. And people were wondering, is there going to be mention of a tape in there? It refers to deep snow stuff. And there wasn't. And I think there's other possibilities. It's possible that the tape was not flown up, but the conversation was played over a phone line.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And the reason I say that also is that when we talk about this telephone tapping operation in Mexico City, it's always described as a CIA operation.
You're talking about, just for people at home, you're talking about Leon Voy, the cryptonym. Leon Voy is the cryptonym for the taping in Mexico City. Go on.
Right. We've learned much since that the surveillance of the Cuban and Soviet embassies in Mexico City was abundant. They had 3 photograph bases. Later, microphone emplacements in the Cuban embassy, apparently not there at that time.
Pulse cameras.
Follow people to and from airports, pick trash, I mean, you name it. And 2 human informants in the Cuban embassy as well, we learned. So, but this is not strictly a CIA operation. This is a joint CIA Mexican government operation. And that's important because Hoover had a lot of dealings with people like the leaders of Mexican government. I mean, the FBI is more than domestic.
Right. Well, we kind of controlled the DFS down there, the intelligence unit of Mexico, and we were tapping the president-elect, if I recall correctly.
And so one thing that caught my eye was one of the declassifications was a transcript of a conversation between Hoover and John McCone. And this is, I think, around the 26th of November, a few days later. And they start talking about this business of Mexico City. And Hoover uses this very funny language to say, well, our source is telling us. And he starts referring to information about what's in the tape. And it's funny language talk about our source. And I think I'm speculating here, but what he might be talking about is that the Mexicans have another copy of this tape, and Hoover has gotten access to it, and that's where the FBI information.
Wow.
So it's a possibility.
Well, this is the same organization that picks up Sylvia Duran and tortures her with the intent, I believe, to get her to admit that she had, or agree that she had some sort of relationship with Lee Harvey Oswald, and that indeed he had been in the consulate.
Our government was not of one mind about this. Certainly the ambassador down there, Ambassador Mann, and some other folks were very keen on getting Sylvia Duran to confess, and David Phillips pushed the Alvarado story very hard, even though this is a guy who was a walk-in to
talk about Gilberto Alvarado for 2 minutes, the Nicaraguan intelligence operative.
This guy's even in the Warren Report. He's referred to as D in the Warren Report.
Right.
He was a Nicaraguan undercover agent who walked in to the American embassy in Mexico City saying, I'm a Nicaraguan communist, and I saw Lee Oswald take $6,500 in the Cuban embassy to kill Kennedy. And
from a redheaded Negro, quote
unquote. Redheaded Negro.
Just for people at home, just to be emphatic about it.
If you get into the story, it's like a grade B movie script.
Believe me, I've written those, so I know.
He says, Oswald says, "You're not man enough. I'll do it."
Right. Nick Danger, Third Eye.
There was another guy, Pedro Gutierrez Valencia, who a couple months later walked in and said, no, I saw him take money outside the embassy to kill Kennedy. And, but you joke about it, but this was taken very seriously. The formation of the Warren Commission was driven in part by that story in particular, and more generally, the push that this was a Castro plot. And, Lyndon Johnson, we found out on these tape phone calls, is talking about 40 million Americans who can die if we go to war with the Soviets. And that was how he pressed his old mentor, Richard Russell, onto the commission. That was how we got Earl Warren onto it, which was a masterstroke because nobody. Do
you think he was bluffing, Rex? Was that part of the cover-up, was to spook the shit out of these people on another level down below?
Johnson was a savvy guy, so I wouldn't put it past him to use this. He had his hands already firmly on the reins of government and was not going to push the button.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
However, I don't think it's quite as simple as that, because it was serious. The Senate was on the verge of flying people like Alvarado up to testify in Congress. And so this kind of thing could easily get away from the control of people.
Well, it's kind of like an Epstein scandal, it just gets out of control. I'm not right, Rex. I mean, I understand politically why LBJ wants to bottle it, but do you believe there was a real thing there of a possible World War III against the Soviets, or at a minimum, a Bay of Pigs too, Rex?
I don't know. I do sympathize with Johnson in the sense that I think that kind of thing could have stampeded. If this was a year after the missile crisis, and if really the American public and powerful people within our society firmly believed that Castro killed Kennedy, hard to keep that bottled up. And so the Warren Commission clearly was formed with its primary mission to stop all that, to tamp it all down, and put the seal of the American government on the lone nut thing. And that was
isn't that what David Atlee Phillips is all about? Trying to, to bottle this up, or I mean, what is Phillips? He has many roles.
He was personally one of the most important people pushing the Alvarado story in real time that was going on. So he's been all over the place.
What is his allegation that 1976, the so-called David Atlee Phillips allegation, that if you recall?
I'm trying to remember.
I mean, was this about? This might have been about Alvarado and that situation, but he testified under oath.
One of the things he talked about, which is interesting, was when the whole business of the tapes and stuff. I'm trying to remember the chronology exactly, but in that time frame in the 70s, a little bit of this information started to come out. Most of it was in the 90s, and Phillips. When I think it was not the church committee, I think it was the House committee had him testify, he started talking about tapes of Oswald, and he talked about a tape in which Oswald spoke at length to the Soviets about requesting money for travel.
Right. To fill people in. Right. Oswald, according to David Atlee Phillips, Oswald was in contact with the Soviet embassy about getting him money to fly back to the Soviet Union in exchange for some cockamamie information, Rex, which he never delineated.
You know what's funny? I don't know if that story's phony blowing or not. And the reason I say that is the Tarasovs, the translator couple that the House committee interviewed.
Tell us who the Tarasovs are and how they fit in. This couple. Go on. I'm sorry.
Sure, Boris and Anna Tarasov. So there's this whole taping operation going on, and a lot of the conversations are in Spanish, and a lot of them are in Russian. And so for the Russian ones, you need Russian experts to translate them, so the station chief doesn't have to learn Russian. And so Boris and Anna Tarasov were a husband and wife team that did that. And in 1976, the early House committee that was run by a guy named Dick Sprague and Bob Tannenbaum, before they got fired and replaced by Blakey's
we recently had Tannenbaum on the show, but go on.
So they flew down to Mexico and interviewed the Tarasov, and this was part of their guns blazing approach that got them fired, basically. But that is an amazing transcript to read. And I guess the tape is actually available to listen to now as well. And one of the things that Anna Tarasov was quite clear about, and she had a better memory than Boris, to be clear, but was a lengthy conversation in English where money was brought up, whatever, and it sounded a lot like the Phillips allegation. And I don't think Anna Tarasov was part of some deception plot or whatever. Who knows?
Except that her husband disagreed with her.
He in that conversation, no. Later on, Boris all of a sudden had a big fuzzy memory and whatever.
Right.
So I don't know. There's a million stories like this that, this is the Kennedy assassination all over. You sort of follow it and you follow it and follow it, and then you're left with, okay, maybe.
Maybe. Well, if you go into the Lopez report, I mean, he has FBI agent Belmont talking to Tolson saying Dallas agents listened to the tape in the Lopez report, for what that's worth. Two investigators for the House.
There's a bunch of different pieces of the documentation of that. We probably shouldn't spend all our time in the Mexico City rabbit hole. I have to get dinner in a couple hours. But
well, just tell us who Ann Goodpasture was and why she thought that Wynne Scott might have had this tape in his safe.
Sure. Ann Goodpasture was basically I don't know what the right word is, Gal Friday, special assistant to the chief of station, Win Scott in Mexico City Station. She was the one who wrote the station, chronology. I cheekily one point said that I thought that they had her put it together so that they'd have a record to keep their lies straight.
Yeah.
On it, but she had an important role in a lot of this, and she was interviewed by the Review Board in the 90s, and I think it's there where they got onto this subject of a tape, and her comment was just, well, it could have been a tape that Win Scott had squirreled away in his safe.
What a weird thing to say. What do you make of that?
Maybe it's true. We're not going to untangle this, I'm sorry to say, because I spent a few years like deep in the Mexico City rabbit hole, and I still couldn't tell you why on earth they sent the photograph of the guy who was in Oswald up that evening on the plane.
Who do you think that was in that photograph, by the way?
I don't know.
Soviet agent? He looks like a Russian.
It could be. I mean, there was a theory that he was this guy Yuri Moskалov, maybe not, but he's just one guy. He's clearly not Oswald. And then, of course, you have all the people saying, well, they had actual photographs of Oswald, and it's like, well, why? Where are they then?
Right. If Oswald had been in Mexico City, which I never believed, I don't know what your take is. I never believed he was there.
I one time, I never published it, but I one time put all the evidence pro and con like down in a giant list, and it was astounding how much was on each side of the ledger.
Right.
I will tell you though, what I don't pretend to understand all this stuff perfectly, but I have come to the tentative conclusion for my own sake that he was there and he was impersonated, that both things are true.
I've heard that theory before.
And one of the things that convinced me that was Larry Hancock and David Boylan wrote a book recently called The Oswald Puzzle.
Yeah, which I have.
It's
a good book. It's a good, I have it, yeah.
I got involved in I helped him out with the photo research for it. There's a couple of good photo insert sections, and I had a hand in some of that. And in particular, I went to the Dallas Police or the municipal department, whatever, has an online archive of evidence, photographic evidence from the Dallas Police originally. And I was going through the whole kit and caboodle, and then all of a sudden, boom, there it is, 3/4 of the way through. There's a bunch of Oswald's possessions, some little photographs lying around, and there's 2 more pictures of the visa picture. For people who don't know, this is...
Well, yeah. I mean, there is a Priscilla McMillan move to bring these tchotchkes from Mexico City over to the Secret Service moments before the Warren Commission is about to publish, because they keep asking for information or any documentation. Yeah. So, I mean, Priscilla McMillan finding this, quote unquote, I mean, it's preposterous, Rex. Right. And it's a postcard. It's some bull's ears or tickets to a bullfight. Give me a break. Yeah. I mean, that's why I don't believe he was there. Plus the lack of photographs, Rex.
This is a core problem with this case, that there's enough evidence of serious evidence of evidence tampering. You know, some of it quite serious and for real and not to be dismissed, that it causes all of us to be suspicious about everything. And this is both natural and it gets in the way as well, because if you can't believe any of the evidence, you might as well throw up your hands and go to a baseball game instead. So the hard job is sort of picking through and trying to decide what's plausible and what's not. And people differ on that. And it makes the case hard.
If you trace them back to September 28th, a month or so or 6 weeks before the assassination, then you've got awareness of the intelligence agencies of Oswald's presence in Mexico City and doing nothing about it at a minimum.
Yep.
At a minimum, Rex, right?
No, I think everybody I know that knows this stuff well and knows the CIA and organizations better than I do has seemed to have come to the conclusion that there was some kind of operation involving Oswald at play. That does not necessarily mean that he's a government agent. There are people are unwittingly used in operations all the time as well. Right. So, and we don't know what the operation was, so it's still very sketchy and fuzzy, but the handling of the information about Oswald, James Angleton, the head of counterintelligence, hanging on to all the stuff in his file so closely, the fact that when the station in Mexico City asked about this guy Oswald, who showed up on the radar, the CIA headquarters lied to them and said that they didn't have any information beyond that Oswald was in the Soviet Union coming back, maybe. You know, it doesn't add up to anything.
Well, not to mention Coleman and Slauson, the Warren Commission people who told the Assassination Record Review Board that they went to Mexico City and listened to the tapes. I mean, there's just too many people here, Rex.
Slauson first told them that he wasn't authorized to tell them.
Right.
Them being the government.
Tell the audience who Kostakov was and what Department 13 might have been.
Sure. Kostakov, Valery Kostakov worked in the Soviet embassy. He was one of the three main, three people that that may have, this is in the book, had a meeting with Oswald on Saturday morning. But Kostakov, we know, was referred to on a phone line that when Oswald and or somebody impersonating him, I don't know how we want to talk about this. Let me back up. There are a few sketchy transcripts in the record now of taped phone calls transcribed, which refer to a man named Kostakov. Kostakov was there. He was alleged in some government files to be an assassination expert, wet affair, so-called Department 13. I think this is actually in great dispute in the record, but there was allegations of this. And this is another thing that caused huge consternation in Washington the week of the assassination, because you not only got these allegations about the Cubans, now you've got a Soviet assassination expert that maybe met with Oswald down there. You know, the rumors were flying, and the hard evidence was not there.
Does he refer to Kostakov as a different name? I think Oswald in the letter that Ruth Payne might have written.
We got to get off Mexico City, but yeah, Oswald wrote a letter to the Soviet embassy ostensibly about their travel arrangements to basically trying to get them out of the U.S. again, back to Soviet Union or Cuba. It's all very sketchy. And he refers to, in this letter, to a meeting with Comrade Costin when he was in Mexico.
Costin, thank you.
And makes the crazy, strange, ominous thing, but we did not have time to complete our business as planned. This set off alarm bells as well. The story is uber complicated because there was a typed version of this thing and a handwritten version, and Ruth Payne.
Right. Yeah, we've talked about that.
We didn't want to go there. No.
Right. That's a complicated thing.
The larger picture again is that I believe that this stuff was taken seriously enough in Washington and used as well. Maybe, you can figure out where to draw the line to put together a commission whose marching orders were different from what they publicly stated. One of the phone calls that came out in the LBJ tapes was him calling Richard Russell the night after they announced the Warren Commission, telling Russell, "Oh yeah, I've named you, by the way, against your will." And Russell saying, "No, I can't serve." He says, "Dick, it's already been announced, and you can, do this for your country. Your country needs you." And then he tells Russell the story of how he got Warren onto the commission. And what he tells Russell is, well, Bobby and them went up to see him, and he told them no. I called him down to the Oval Office, and he told me no twice. And then I just pulled out a little story about what Hoover told me about a little incident in Mexico City. And Warren started crying, and he said, "Well, if it's that serious, I'll just do whatever you say." Now,
LBJ could have been using it for his own manipulative ideas, but I think it's Russell who says that I don't believe what the CIA gives us. They could alter it or doctor it.
I wrote about that years ago, and I was mistaken. I believe that. I think he's referring to the Soviets. They're talking about getting stuff.
Okay. All right. So anything the CIA gives us, we should believe then, as opposed to the Soviets.
Yeah. Well.
All right. So let's get out of Mexico City then.
Well, now before we go, we do have a possible representation of that.
Oh yeah, I wanted
conversation
to play
that's not what it looked like though.
Anyway, well, we're using This is using AI for all the
Oh,
sensors
don't
out there
even
to
say that.
clear.
We should have told Rex we found the tape. I
No,
just
well, we're
wanted to
not
tell
going
him
to do
we
that
found
because
it.
I don't want to get in trouble with the YouTube gods. So we'll make it clear.
Hello, Edgar.
This man, Oswald in Dallas, we of course charged him with the murder of the president. The evidence that they have at the present time is not very strong.
Oh my God.
No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
Have you established any more about the visit to the Soviet embassy in Mexico in September?
B and W photos of a burly man, 35, who the CIA claimed was Oswald exiting Soviet embassy in Mexico City.
No, that's the angle that's very confusing for this reason. We have up here the tape and photograph of the man who was at the Soviet embassy using Oswald's name. That picture and the tape do not correspond to this man's voice nor his appearance.
FBI agents in headphones listen to reel-to-reel tape recorders and study photos.
In other words, it appears that there was a second person who was at the Soviet embassy down there.
I wonder if you will get me a little synopsis and let me have what developments come your way during the day.
I certainly will do that.
You're able to get that off of the erased tape. You guys are good.
Yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
easy. Now, with AI, you could do anything. We had the help of an obscure historian, Michael Beschloss, who said he's finally going to help us get to the bottom of this thing.
Anyway, for those who are interested, that is a clip from the LBJ audio drama written by Mr. Groubert there on the top right and available for all locals paid supporters as of last Friday or Saturday. So
Yeah, we've
anybody who's on the phone-
we've taken some scripts and turned them into audio dramas, Rex, that I worked
Yeah,
on with
that's
Oliver Stone, and this was one of them. This was part one of a mini series that I wrote on LBJ that covers that particular little niche. So I thought it might be appropriate because
That's
you're
very
here
cool.
today to play that little segment, and I think maybe we could preview it in Lancer again. I think last time we previewed the Oswald one, Eric, didn't we?
Yeah,
we were at Lancer last time.
that was our presentation in 23.
Right. But okay, so where are we now, Rex? What's going on now?
Well, I'm out of the day-to-day research stuff.
Right.
I guess where I feel like the state of the case is that I'll say two things that are the opposite, I guess, at the same time. I've always been kind of a pessimist on the case that we will reach any kind of real consensus about what's going on, what actually happened. On the other hand, I am continually surprised by people, that some of whom I know, pushing the state of the case forward year after year after year. I think the work by, I don't want to, some of them I know, people like Larry Hancock, people like Jeff Morley, and there's many others as well that are doing active research, chipping away at things. The government document story is not over yet. I know Jeff Morley and the Luna Committee may be going after William Harvey's travel records, which is relevant.
And also the KGB files, Rex.
Yep, as well. And so there's certainly more records that could help. I do feel like we have, that we're at the 99% point of government records that will inform the case.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of we kind of are where we are, although I've said that before. And so,
You have said that before. You've said that. You've said that for years, Rex. I mean,
well, I told
and then
you,
all of a sudden there's another revelation.
and I'm always pleasantly surprised. And so, yeah. So who knows? I don't know what the future is going to bring. I do feel like one of the things that I think is unfortunate is that the public at larger outside the group of people that stay focused on this, really still hasn't heard the message of even some of the core stuff that's been learned. If you talk to people that don't pay attention to this, they might be skeptical about the Warren Commission story. They'll say, I think maybe the mafia did it or whatever.
Yeah.
But what, to me, two really striking things, apart from whodunit, came out of the declassifications of the 90s and later. One was the stark evidence of a federal cover-up, in any number of arenas, from Mexico City to the medical evidence to you name it. And these are stories that most people have not heard, and some of them, and I think they're relevant because one way to think about them is they tell you about the federal government in extreme crisis and how the truth takes, second, third, fourth tier. Maybe that's a charitable view, but I think for a lot of the people involved, it was like marching orders that were going to do things. Earl Warren is not a bad person, but I personally believe that he smelled stuff that he didn't want to go there on, right? And so he just took the marching orders and let it carry itself along.
Well, just to interject how crazy this was, it would be like taking Chief Justice Roberts today and putting him in charge of the Epstein investigation. No, I'm not even exaggerating.
Role. Yep.
Right? I mean, it's like, why would I want to be involved in this thing? He could say, like, Warren did, these cases may come before me. And as LBJ said, well, Oswald's dead, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah. It's funny on the business of the Chief Justice, they use that.
Yeah.
Jack Ruby. So if you want to do a whole no holds barred investigation and get to the bottom of this, just as a layperson, I would say, like, on day one, there's two people I want to talk to. I want to talk to Marina Oswald, find out what she knows. I want to talk to Jack Ruby and find out what the hell.
Right.
The Warren Commission interviewed Jack Ruby once on June 7th, 1964, when the report was already in draft form.
Right.
And they had used the excuse for the first 3 months that, well, he has this trial on in Texas and we don't want to interfere with that. The Chief Justice of the U.S. apparently couldn't figure out some mechanism.
This is the retrial that Rex is referring to.
No, this is Jack Ruby's trial for murder.
His first trial or second trial?
His first trial ended on March 14th. And between January and March 14th, Warren was saying, well, we can't interview Jack Ruby because, I can't figure out a way that we could do it securely or whatever. Well, there's almost 3 months between March 14th and June 7th. So you would think, okay, why aren't they on a plane on March 15th? And why, when they finally go on June 7th, do they leave the two Ruby experts on the tarmac and just Warren and Dulles and Arlen Specter go down there to interview him? So
also, they had flown many people to Washington to testify.
Yeah, no, okay. Well, Ruby begged to be taken to Washington.
Right. It wasn't that bizarre.
So there are things like this that defy explanation, for an honest investigation. There's another one, maybe we don't have time to talk about it, but George Berkeley is my favorite.
I love George Berkeley. Talk about George Berkeley, one of my favorites. Go ahead.
Okay. So George Berkeley was the president's personal physician. He was in the motorcade. He was in Parkland Hospital in the operating theater when they tried to save Kennedy's life. He was the one who told Jackie Kennedy they needed the autopsy because he was on Air Force One with her. He was at the autopsy, by some accounts, in charge of it.
That's right.
And he was the only medically trained person present both in the Parkland Hospital operating room and at the autopsy, and therefore uniquely qualified to solve the Warren Commission's conundrum, which was that all the Dallas doctors were talking about entrance wounds and a blowout in the back of the head, and the autopsy was, no, all shots from behind. And Berkeley would be the guy.
Right.
So the Warren Commission, which interviewed, I think, 7 to 10 nurses at Parkland Hospital and every doctor there, and interviewed not many people at the autopsy, but the top 2 autopsy doctors, they never once spoke to George Berkeley.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think Berkeley, when he gets to Bethesda Naval Hospital and he's running this autopsy with Rear Admiral Kinney and Rear Admiral Galloway and these doctors who are following their orders, Fink and the other guys, Humes and Boswell, do you think that George Berkeley woke up that morning and said, I am going to control this autopsy to make it look as if the president had been shot from behind, from up above, and all this physical machinations that Berkeley would have had to have prior knowledge of to construct an autopsy, which is actually a reconstruction of a crime, as you're probably well aware. Do you believe that Berkeley woke up that morning and said, I'm going to do this on my own?
No. And first of all, I guess I don't feel like I understand that well what actually happened at the autopsy. There's a lot of reasons for doubt on many levels, whether the autopsy report that's in evidence is even the original. There's many reasons to doubt that. And so, no. Another thing about Berkeley, by the way, is he was the one who then took the brain and other tissue slides on the materials and brought them over to Robert Kennedy for keeping. And one last thing about Berkeley, when the House Committee files were released in the 1990s, there was a memo to file from Richard Sprague, again, that original head, the guy who went down to Mexico to talk to the Tarasovs. And the memo to file from the head of the House Committee was that we just received a contact from a guy who was Berkeley's lawyer saying, my client is unassuming, but he has information that others besides Oswald must have participated.
Right.
And unfortunately for history, Sprague was fired 8 days later for any number of reasons, not necessarily this one. He was all guns blazing and not long for that committee. And I heard rumors, and I forget from who, and I don't know if it's true, that the review board tried to get the lawyers' files to see if there might be any other information on Berkeley, and originally the family agreed, and then they changed their mind and turned the review board down.
Well, this is a number of times where Berkeley has reached out to investigators on his own.
He's
Rex.
dead now. Yeah,
he's dead, and then his daughter reached out to investigators and then withdrew the offer to them. This back and forth between Berkeley and his daughter is multiple occasions privately, separate from the review board.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, what does Berkeley know that he wanted to talk so badly about?
He might have been an official person in the know to say that the wounds were as described in Dallas and not as described in the autopsy, for instance.
Right, which is what I was basically expecting you to say. The reality of it is there's only one person in the chain of command above Admiral Berkeley. There is no Secretary of the Navy at that time. There is no Vice President of the United States at that time. There is only one man who is the chain of command leader of Admiral Berkeley, and that's LBJ, who makes him his personal physician and demands that he not retire. Berkeley wanted to get out of this thing. I don't know. I'm sure you realize that. And LBJ, again, takes him under his wing like he did Emory Roberts and others, saying, you're not going anywhere, boy. So, I mean, again, to the original question, did Berkeley wake up that morning and said, I am going to run this autopsy as if this man was shot from behind to fit into some pre-constructed narrative moments or hours after the event? It sounds insane.
No, the whole thing, I think, was much more fluid and chaotic than that, and we don't have a very good lens into the details of it. I just had a volunteer offer to do some transcription work for us, and so I had him transcribe the interview with Nurse Audrey Bell from Parkland Hospital, which is fascinating. That we've had the tape online for a while, but there's no transcript of it, and we're going to put one up in a few days. And of the many amazing things she says there, one of them is she's talking with Jeremy Gunn and Doug Horn of the review board, and she says, well, Dr. Perry being the one who did the tracheotomy incision and saw the neck wound most closely, he looked like pure hell on Saturday morning. And they say, oh, really? And she says, well, it's because of all the calls that were coming in from Bethesda during the night. See, they were trying to get him to change his mind about the direction of the wound. And
not only change his mind, but they went to the local Dallas news services and pulled the film of that press conference and removed it from. Right. I mean, again, that's not trying to change somebody's medical mind. That's called a cover-up, Rex.
Well, I know, but I bring it up because it's received wisdom. Even a lot of people who are on the conspiracy side, to use a shorthand, that the people at the autopsy never knew about a neck wound, and they only found out the next day. And here you have Nurse Bell there saying, yeah, no, they were calling us all night. And she's not the only person that talked about calls between them. And so, again, we have these, maybe whispers is too quiet a word. We have, shouting whispers of all kinds of things that don't fit sort of the narrative that, is sort of laid down in history on this stuff. And it gives me caution because there's many strands of this going in different directions. And I think it's challenging to be certain about the truth in this kind of stuff.
What is your theory?
On what? On Audrey? I believe that there were calls there. And I think the most likely thing, let me throw one more piece of information and answer that. J. Lee Rankin was the Warren Commission's executive director. He was a former Solicitor General. This is a serious, no-nonsense, legal beagle expert. And some of the things he said in Warren Commission executive sessions are kind of head-scratching. And one of them was, he says, we have here in the autopsies telling the Warren commissioners in executive session, which were secret until Jim Lazar and Harold Weisberg pried him out of the government in the 70s. We have up here the autopsy report, which says that maybe a fragment came out the neck. Where did he get that from? There's nothing remotely like that in the autopsy report we have. And yet here's the former Solicitor General telling the Warren commissioners that early on. And Russell, at the end of this little conversation they have about medical evidence, says, this isn't something that would run you stark raving mad. And I submit that it would.
Yeah, I mean, is it possible the reason that they're calling Dallas and or doing inquiries is that they are constructing or reconstructing a version of the crime and they are calling them to see what information they have? They're later all pressured by Secret Service who tell them if they ever say anything about this, it'll be the end of their careers.
Yeah. Perry got reamed out by
Perry got completely reamed out. He sits on it the rest of his life. This information, as do the others. So this doesn't seem like they're searching for answers. It seems like they're almost covering their tracks as to what they know in Parkland and what can we use to create this body as a crime site. I mean, it's not like they're uncovering anything. Like, it's almost like I'm not the only one to say this, they're trying to create a record of a crime by doing things to the body. And I don't mean bringing in extra bodies and extra brains, as David Lifton suggested. I would not go that far. Bethesda Naval Hospital had plenty of brains and plenty of bodies on the premises. You didn't have to bring gurneys around the back, as some people suggested back in the day. But nevertheless, this doesn't seem like an investigation into what killed this guy. This seems like and again, a lot of it is covered in Oliver Stone's most recent documentary that DiEugenio wrote. Covers a lot of the autopsy in that documentary that I highly recommend people take a look at from this particular year.
You mean they were almost trying to match a conclusion?
But the question is, how could you come up with a conclusion so quickly? The events are happening in real time.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. For Berkeley to do.
That's why we have all this mess in front of us, because it was sloppy, right? There's no like perfect crime, perfect cover-up thing going on. This was all done on the fly and off the cuff, which is why there's so much evidence of cover-up lying around and people's stories that don't match.
Right. Well, I think it all goes back to this Rosetta Stone, as you called Mexico City. The Rosetta Stone in this particular case might be George Berkeley, who knew all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Either he was ordered to do this or he wasn't.
Well, that was my original point, though, was that he is critical and a person who, if told to speak truthfully under oath and did so, could tell volumes, right?
Right.
And he apparently, we think, seems like wanted to do that with the House committee, and it never came to be. And I guess this is sort of the larger point I was trying to make, that what we're left with is this kind, story after story after story after story like that of evidence of clear cover-up. Where we are in terms of the crime and the perpetrators, less so, although I don't discount the folks I know that are still chasing that stuff. And, and some theories have sort of fallen by the wayside. I think for my money, all the foreign government involvement stuff, the Castro stuff, that was part of the plot, really, not the reality that this.
I agree.
I agree. All the hallmarks of a serious domestic job by people that knew what they were doing.
But again, do you have a theory? I mean, I'm not asking to put you on the spot, but do you have a theory of what actually happened or didn't happen?
No, I don't want to go there. I'll just say that I don't believe. There was a poll that got taken a couple months ago that was in the news that said that, if I get my numbers right, it was something like 30% of people believed Oswald acted alone and 64% thought that he had help. And so I emailed my friend Larry Hancock and I said, I guess you and I are in the 6%.
What is the 6%?
Never fired a shot.
Oh no, I'm in the 6% too. In fact, I think part of the cover up at some point when they were moving the goalpost for the 500th time, it became that Oswald acted alone to Oswald acted with help. That was a goalpost move in the 90s, Rex, that didn't attract much attention.
Yeah. Well, there's always been this push to pin it on Castro. Keeps coming back like a bad penny.
Yeah.
The Oswald had help thing, the problem with that is they went out of their way to paint a pretty credible picture of a loner.
Yeah. A loner with young children and a wife and friends and family.
Yeah.
He's one of the weirdest loners I've ever met.
So I don't subscribe. I stay agnostic about way too much of this stuff. I think it's served me well, actually, because you can decide things that you regret later. But I will say that I read in draft form Larry Hancock and David Boylan's book, The Oswald Puzzle. And that book may be controversial with a lot of people. I expect it is, because it paints a much more Warren Commission-y version of Oswald.
I noticed that.
Except for being involved in a plot to kill the president, which is a big distinction. But it doesn't have him being a secret agent in Russia and whatever. I'm agnostic on some of that stuff. I think it's an interesting perspective and they argue it well. And so it's a worthy book on that front. But the other part of the book they have, which I think bears a lot of serious scrutiny by people if they're interested, is their theory. And it's, I guess, highly informed speculation, maybe is the way to phrase it, that when Oswald got on the radar of Cuban exiles in New Orleans, that people saw him and said, oh, we know what we can do with this guy. And so their theory of the case is that he got played and turned into the patsy by basically the same people that were the Kill Castro team coming out of Miami, JM Wave, whatever. And so if they're correct, and I'm not saying they are, but if they're correct, that's, Cuban exile sharpshooters, maybe in Dealey Plaza, people like maybe William Harvey, Johnny Roselli, whatever involved. And then you take it up as far as the chain as you want, because those people are hooked in, right?
Right.
So, and you'll never know, because I always tell people who want to know how high it went that you should read the Church Committee's report on the plots to kill Castro, where in 1976, with the wind in their back, a reformed Congress took on the subject of how did we come to be in a position of trying to kill Fidel Castro and Patrice Lumumba and these other foreign leaders. And with all the subpoena power in the world, they did not get to the bottom of the questions of whether presidents authorized these hits, these attempted hits or not.
Well, I mean, with plausible deniability, I would assume that's where they would end up.
And so imagine, if you will, a high-level domestic plot to kill the president of the United States. It's not on paper, and even if you had subpoena power and the Church Committee's kind of will, you might not uncover, but you certainly won't in any normal environment.
Right. No, I agree. It's similar to the investigation into this is similar to the Church Committee, is that you're going to find out a million other things that are fun to find out that lead to a lot more transparency in government, but you're never going to get to the smoking gun in this particular case.
Involved, I mean, Oliver Stone, I think, hit the nail on the head in this sense in the movie when he has the Joe Pesci, fairy character say, the shooters don't even know who killed Kennedy.
Right. Right. I mean, but look how much we've found out since 1960. I mean, just by guys like you, going back to Mary Ferrell, going back to Sylvia Mega, all these things that we found out, not about who killed him, but at least a trillion other factoids.
What we also found out a lot is what you might call the context of the crime. the secret foreign policy stuff in the Kennedy administration that came out in the 90s as well, including paper, drawn up on paper and signed plans to withdraw completely from Vietnam, reaffirmed on November 20th after being drawn up in the spring.
Right.
And many other things. I mean, I think we learned more that puts Kennedy in the light of somebody who in 1963, anyway, whatever he said about the Cold War in his inaugural address, was trying to wind it down. And there's multiple things that were known all along and some that weren't known all along that came out in these declassifications. And it sort of puts an extra poignant tragedy on this whole thing. I mean, the Mary Ferrell Foundation, we cover the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King as well. And this was, 3 leading lights of progressive, competent government just gunned down one after another. And, there's some ways in which America has not recovered from that, I think.
Well, to be honest, MLK was not part of the government, but
RFK
RFK was replaced by Humphrey as the leading candidate, who may not have won the nomination.
Right.
We don't really
know.
Martin
Luther King was an important political figure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So and that stuff is still kind of a little too hot to handle. I'm a fan of Ken Burns. I really liked the Civil War thing, blew me away when I saw it back in college, and I like his work. I was disappointed by episode 2 of this Vietnam series that he did a couple years ago because it spends an hour on the Kennedy era, and there is not one word on these withdrawal plans.
Interesting.
And the people that dismiss it, they have a whole story to tell about it, that, well, he wasn't serious about it because he thought the war was going well, and that's why he was going to withdraw, and if it hadn't been going well...
why does LBJ sign National Security Action Memo 273 while the body is still in the casket in the rotunda, Rex? I mean, is it that big of a hurry, or is it a quid pro quo?
I don't know. I think Johnson.
Why is Johnson above reproach?
I don't think Johnson was a complex character.
Really? Complex? Really?
Above reproach doesn't fit it. You could probably tell I'm not in the camp that Johnson is a killer of John Kennedy.
Right.
But he was an intense guy with many aspects to him, complicated figure, yeah. But some of the things they stick with me. There's a conversation he has with Richard Russell around the Gulf of Tonkin time. And this is the drumbeat to war that McNamara, of all people, the guy who helped draw up write up the withdrawal plans, is now beating the drums harder than anybody.
Yeah, why does McNamara switch on a dime?
I don't know. But Johnson is telling Richard Russell they could be shooting at whales out there for all I know. This is during the blank check Tonkin Gulf moment.
Yeah.
So
now, Rex,
then go ahead. I'm sorry, Eric.
No, I was just going to ask. You said you're definitely not in the camp that LBJ did it or was involved in it.
I don't.
Where would you place his involvement overall? Cover up anything, or just completely clueless?
The cover up was an all-of-government affair, and LBJ played his role. Hoover played his role. CIA officials played their role. Warren commissioners played their role, although some of them regretted it. Some like Russell just weren't paying attention until it was too late. So I don't know. It's hard to, with complex figures like that. It's hard to know the core truth of things. It just doesn't smell right to me. But people differ.
Well, I'm just wondering how some stuff could have been, under his nose. I mean, was he completely boxed out and clueless? I'm just curious on that because. When you're a guy there and you have access to all the power, especially after the fact, because then he is in charge. He can ask anybody anything.
The problem is so there's no Kennedy supporters on the Warren Commission for one thing. There was no Northeast liberals there. I think the major players there were happy to see Kennedy gone. Johnson's president. Hoover never really particularly liked him. There's no shedding of tears here, right? And so I think some of it's just explained by that. Why is it in Johnson's interest? tamping out the calls for World War III, however seriously you take them, is like,
well, that's definitely in his interest. Like you said, he already has the reins of power.
yeah, he wants, if you listen to some of those phone calls from that week, he calls Martin Luther King and he says, yeah, isn't it terrible about Kennedy? And we got this budget coming up.
Yeah.
Like
I know he skips over it pretty quickly. That's a strange phone call.
So I chalk a lot. To me personally, again, people have different opinions. I chalk it up to that Johnson's like, great, I'm president now. Awesome. Let's move forward, and
Well, wouldn't you be
Well,
worried
let's
that
move
there'd be a
forward with the
bullet
cover-up,
for
too.
you? Well, I'm just saying, the guy that you just took over his office, maybe you'd be a little bit concerned that, hey, there could be a bullet headed my way.
there are many accounts that on the plane he was hiding in the bathroom at one point.
Right, that's from Godfrey McHugh. General Godfrey McHugh said that. Yeah.
I had a conversation once with James Galbraith, the son of John Kenneth Galbraith. He teaches economics in Texas, and he was friends with Bill Moyers. He's sort of a player in Democratic politics, and he knew Bill Moyers, who was later PBS fame, but Johnson's press secretary at the time. And Moyers was on Air Force One, and Moyers told James Galbraith that on Air Force One, Johnson was sitting at one point by the window, staring out the window, looking very forlorn. And Moyers went and sat next to him, and Johnson looks up and says, "I wonder if the missiles are flying."
Mm.
And the instinctive impression Moyers got, he was talking about American missiles. Like, this is it, that they, whether whoever, Curtis LeMay, you name, pick your they, have killed Kennedy and launched World War III.
Well, Johnson seemed to have the ability to talk to people and say in their language what they wanted to hear. And you could have his conversations with Southern Democrats on the record and have a completely different LBJ than the way he spoke to Galbraith.
Yeah.
Or calling up RF Kennedy, who he said repeatedly to anybody who will listen to him, "I'm going to cut his throat if it's the last thing I do." And you're well aware of that, Rex.
Yeah,
including
yeah.
gesturing.
There was no love lost between the two of them. That's for sure.
Well, anyway, let's let Rex get out of here and make his dinner and go about his life. We've already upset him enough with these talks of Mexico City, for Christ's sakes. We've opened up all kinds of wounds in Rex's mind. He was having a pleasant week until we got our hands on him.
It was a pleasure to have you guys get me monologuing nonetheless.
Yeah, it's great fun, Rex. Really great fun. We'll talk about you and ask about you in Dallas this weekend, and we'll miss you not being there. But I'm sure many of your friends will be there. We tried to have Bill on last week. We had some technical difficulties. We'll get back to him. But his 12,
in Mexico, right?
Yeah, he was in Mexico in the jungle on a safari or something. It didn't really work. But his piece, the 12 people involved with Oswald's creation, is still holds water very well.
Yeah, we published that on the Mary Ferrell site.
Yeah, and people who want to see that on Mary Ferrell Foundation, Bill Simpich's piece on the 12 people involved in Oswald's creation, fantastic article, and there's a lot of other stuff on there. I strongly recommend people sign up and become members and support this 501c and Rex's work, along with everybody else who supplies documents to the Mary Ferrell Foundation. It's well worth it, and it's a tax write-off. So there you go.
There you go.
Rex, thank you. Thank you for coming by. Thank you. Rex Bradford, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you much. Let's see. Oh, well, you know what? While we're shifting, let's talk about our upcoming event, Mark.
Oh, this will be fun. We got to start packing, Eric. We can't stay here much longer.
No, I'm flying in 2 days.
You better get ready, Hunley. You know how there's maybe it's less of a chaotic situation now with the government being open, but yeah, this is going to be fun. A lot of the people and information that Rex is talking about originated right here at the Lancer Conference in Dallas, Texas, going back to the year 2000, when he gave that presentation about the audio, the LBJ Hoover tapes being erased. I mean, that's where this story comes from, and then it's a published article that you could read on the Mary Ferrell Foundation. You can read all of Rex's work that's on there, and like I said, I strongly recommend that you check that out. But I also recommend since time is a wasting, that you may want to get yourself a virtual ticket to the event, which is fairly inexpensive, and you can watch everything at home. You don't have to get off your fat ass. You can eat the foods that you want and interact. I think there's a chat where you can watch everything and talk to people at the same time, Eric, right? Or
That's what they tell me. And again, it's easy to do. There's a link in the description that you can click, or you can point your phone if you're watching this on the TV. Apparently, officially, YouTube has said that the #1 device is now televisions over phones.
Okay.
Of people consuming YouTube. So a lot of you are watching on TVs. You can point your phone at the TV, bottom right corner there with the QR code. And most importantly, what do they need to use when they're signing up?
Well, Untold 10, but more importantly, what's the name of the website to go to? Because I never really understood this.
Assassination Conference.
That's if you .com. Okay, so if you're not doing any of this other,
that's why I have a link that they can click or they can scan.
There are people who are listening to us. I just want them who don't have links or visual codes. You could go to where? What is the assassinationconference.com?
Correct. Assassinationconference.com.
Because I didn't find this out until last week. It's in this fine print there. But this is for people who are just doing an audio or not seeing any of the visuals, Eric. So I thought, because some guys, like the tractor guy, is on his tractor cutting corn, listening to us. I didn't realize how many people listen to us driving tractor trailers across the country, listening. So it's assassinationconference.com. The virtual ticket with the discount is probably around $75. You can watch the entire weekend at home or in your truck, or listen to it. And you'll get to see and hear all these other people. The virtual
ticket's going to be just under 70 with the discount.
Oh, it's under 70. Okay,
right,
cool.
$75.99, but you get a 10% discount.
Okay, fine. There's no handling, there's no shipping. Okay, that's
right. That's just virtual. So, you're good to go.
Right.
Assassinationconference.com right here on the bottom. And then those who are local, obviously, there's if you live in the area, come on by.
Yeah, I wanted to say that because she told us last night there's about 5 to 6 tickets left for the banquet dinner. If you're thinking about coming, because that is a finite amount of physical people to get in there. There's a lot of fat people who love the banquet. You can't fit as many fat people into the room as you can skinny people. So I think there's about 5, 6, 7 tickets left for the banquet, which you would then see us after the banquet, since we're headlining this cockamamie thing. There's a banquet, there's a raffle, there's awards, and then there's us, like Saturday night. But Friday it opens, and Sunday it continues. So it really is a 3-day festival of love, peace, and happiness in Dallas in a couple of days.
Absolutely.
Now, that being said, regarding locals, I just want to say that Eric pointed out, he touched on it. Unstructured.locals.com is the place to go to get the LBJ audio drama and the 5-part Oswald audio drama as part of your annual membership, which I believe is now reduced to $50 a year, Eric?
It is reduced to $50 for an annual membership, and it will be $50 until the end of time if you get it in this time period.
Oh, so your grandfather in.
Right. Exactly. When you renew, it'll be 50. When you renew again, if you let it slip, it'll go up to 70. But if you renew, it'll be 50-50. I just want to point that out because
we played a little clip of it, but the entire script, you get the PDF and you get the audio drama, so you could follow along at home. And I think you could possibly gift it to other people, although I don't know how you technically do that. Plus, there's PDFs up there of out of print, super rare, super expensive JFK books, and a lot of secret documents.
And you can participate in your own private chat. So there are people on there right now that are chatting, and only paid supporters are able to interact and chat. Now, we set it up because we're trying to be as fair and generous as possible, that anybody can watch and they can view the chat that's going on and see the episodes and watch them, ad free. But if you want to interact with people and you want to post on it, which is even better, it's a community, so you can comment, you can post, you can interact with each other. That also comes by being a paid supporter. So there's a lot more that's being offered.
Yeah, it's like Rex was saying with the Mary Ferrell Foundation. You can go through there and not be a member. But if you start to want to get PDFs of documents, you have to become a member. So they have their own similar structure to what we're doing with locals.
Exactly. And I think it's well worth it. I mean, we have people who have been locals members now for 3 years or, longer, just like, we have people who are supporting on the channel, and it really does mean a lot. We appreciate it. But
Yeah,
I want to
unstructured.locals.com. I didn't know what
Sure.
Hunley was talking about 3 years ago. So I just want to be emphatic about that. Unstructured.locals.com, because I was completely confused.
It still is. Yes, absolutely. There is again, there are links in the descriptions wherever you're watching, but yes, unstructured.locals.com, 100%. If you go to locals.com and search Unstructured, you'll find it. So unstructured.locals.com, you will find it. It's easy to do. The sale will be going on through the end of the month, and then it goes back up to $70 a year. And if you want to wait until December and pay $70, we're perfectly fine with that. We happily
we just
take
dropped
the
the audio drama. It took us a year to do it, so you may want to jump on that.
Yeah, we definitely want to celebrate that. So it's kind of like a Black Friday anniversary of the JFK assassination. That's why we're doing it now. We did it last year at this time, but not as long. We're doing it a little bit longer this year for everybody. So really quickly before we go, we do have some supporters here. Heather Whatever was a member for 14 months now and is glad to see us on. Thank you, Heather. Diffuse, speaking of Tractor Guy, by the way, Tractor Guy did buy a virtual ticket already.
Okay, well, because he's on that tractor. That's the way to go. That's
right.
The way to go.
And he's been a member for 20 months.
He says hearing. That's why I was trying to address that audience of unstructured.locals.com, who may not read that anywhere.
Which I don't know, though, but if he's in there typing in the chat and he's hearing, it's like, do you close your eyes?
No, he went into the bathroom, the crops, so he cut the crops, and he went into the latrine.
Oh, okay. So that's your story, huh?
Well, I'm just guessing. I don't know.
All right, Pamela, who's really a wonderful regular and always supportive, sharing on X and everything else, with $5. Happy Tuesday, guys. Thank you, Pamela. David Bell is a new member. I think you've been a member before,
I think it's
David.
Ball, by the way.
Or Ball. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I think you've been before, but thank you very much. And then Tractor Guy continuing gifted 10 America's Untold Stories memberships as well. Thank you very much, Tractor Guy. And wow, Nate the Lawyer. And I wanted to everybody please know that Nate the Lawyer. Well, I'll read the super chat and then I'll talk.
Yeah.
Love you guys and thank you for all your support. Waiting for my brain to get cut open by the doctors. Thank you, Mark, for all your messages. Thank you, Eric, for being my best friend. Love you guys. Nate's going to be in surgery tomorrow, and kind of a big deal. It's a brain surgery, and I hope you guys pray for him.
Yeah, that's the way to go. Like I was saying to Nate this morning, prayer really works. I mean, I've used it my whole life, and a lot of people out there know that prayer works. And I said prayers for Nate this morning, and I told him how to pray for himself. But if you people could pray for Nate, there's a lot of power in group prayer, as many of our followers know. I've been a big advocate. I pray every morning on my knees, and I prayed for Nate this morning on my knees. And I had a brain tumor a number of years ago, and using doctors and treatment, it is shrunk in size to where it is completely manageable. Nate has a different kind of brain tumor, so they're going to have to go in and go get it. But these guys have done this a lot. And I know Nate is terrified, as I would be and anybody else would be. But God has a plan for Nate, and whatever that plan is, God's going to carry it out. And he has some of the best guys in Houston. Houston, by the way, is one of the centers of brain research and brain surgery in the country. For some reason, he happens to be in the right place at the right time. So he's got that going for him. So
And
yeah,
they
the
flew
power
in
of
the
prayer.
top surgeon in the world or in the country too, which
The
Thank
power,
you.
like I said, yeah, if you could pray for him, it really helps. Power group prayer is very, very powerful.
Thank you. Yes. And everyone, we're going to now head over to said locals
Okay,
and continue the conversation there.
right on.
Hope to see you.
Okay.